Hello, everyone. Juxtaposition here. They said it couldn't be done, but Juxtaposition is going to do a video on Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, and I'll do more than one video. All right, so behind my head here, behind my shoulder, this is the main gate to Zorro Ranch, located in New Mexico, the pseudo state of New Mexico. It is 30 miles directly south of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and just add another 3 miles and you get to Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's murder, their double homicide. They're 33 miles away from this gate. 33 miles away. That's the highest order of the obedience within the power of the pyramid, the obelisk, chain of command. This is a military operation, people. It always has been. It always will be. The ranch was established by the Spanish in and around 1775, before the infamous War of Independence or the Boston Tea Party was around, when the Spanish put up some fences and started raising cows to roam this area. Now, there's some questions as to how many acres this ranch is. Wikipedia will tell you initially that it's 7,600 acres, which does comport to the number 13. 7 plus 6 is 13. I'll buy that for $1, sure, because it's a military ranch. It was a Spanish military colonial ranch belonging to Switzerland in 1775. This ranch belonged to Switzerland, and today in 2026, it still belongs to Switzerland. So the ownership of the property really hasn't changed. However, for nominal provisional purposes, there's been a few owners of this property, which is also reported to be 10,000 acres large. Then they sublease 1,200 acres to the Arizona Land Commission. For what purpose, I don't know. You should know that there's no trespassing on the ranch, and the ranch is surrounded by other large private ranches, which are owned by, pseudo owners who probably don't really own their ranches either. Making the only way to get in on this property is through the gate with the security clearance, or trespassing across other people's property for miles before you then trespass on this property. Because if you're on this property without permission, you possibly could be charged with criminal trespass and or burglary if you steal a glass of water or something of that nature. So let me read you some particular details about this place. Jeffrey Epstein is accredited to have purchased the land, this 7,600 acre ranch, for $12 million in 1993. Now, that would have made Jeffrey Epstein 40 years old. So if you believe that a 40-year-old man who already has a home in Palm Beach, Florida, and a converted school that he lives in, that's like 20,000 acres of apartment in Manhattan, New York. And let's see, does he have other homes? I'm sure he does. But anyway, you think he's going to buy a ranch, 4-hour plane flight away, then you should get some more LSD and vodka. Okay. There's no way he's buying this ranch. Now, was it assigned to him? Yeah, I believe it was assigned to him for 30 years, almost 30 years. Well, it's hard to know if Jeffrey Epstein is dead or alive. Jeffrey Epstein definitely did not commit suicide. Anyone who thinks Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in a high security federal prison is a moron and an imbecile, and just get off my show, get off my channel and stay off. You believe in flat earth and moon landings and JFK was killed by Lee Oswald. Get lost. Okay. The Zorro Ranch today has been renamed Rancho de San Rafael. And it's in this area of New Mexico that's referred to as Stanley. Stanley is a widely undeveloped piece of property, again, 30 miles south of Santa Fe, which isn't a sophisticated place. And it's also home to the Santa Fe Institute, with anybody who has any part of a brain would know is a money laundering facility for the Department of Energy formerly known as the Atomic Energy Commission, and they were involved with the Institute of Santa Fe, who, by the way, employs Ghislaine Maxwell and other people who may or may not visit the Zorro Ranch, which it was known for from 1993 until the disappearance of Jeffrey Epstein. Either he was spirited away from prison and or he was murdered by NATO soldiers, which either one is totally plausible. It's possible that he didn't escape. He would have been removed or kidnapped from the jail cell. Then they could have staged his death, which wouldn't be the first time that's ever happened. So he could have been removed, and he is alive somewhere else. Maybe Israel, maybe Geneva, Switzerland, maybe Vienna, Austria, maybe Paris, France, maybe Beirut, Lebanon. Who knows? And you know what? I don't care. Who cares? But anyway, then the ranch was transferred to another gajillionaire, billionaire Christian from Texas, from the Dallas-Fort Worth area and Austin, Texas. The property now is under the tutelage of another Jeffrey Epstein replacement. His name is Donald Blaine Huffines. Okay, and he is 67 years old, and he's going to be 66. He's going to be 67 on April 26th. He's 66 years old. Got that? He's 60, or is he 67? Well, maybe he's 67. He's going to be 68. He's going to be 68 in April 26th. Anyway, he's a politician. He's a former senator from the state senator of the Lone Star State of Texas. So he was a Texas state senator, and he's associated with the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro Complex, which we just did a video with Shirley regarding Trophy Club. So, Donald Huffines is familiar with Trophy Club for sure. And he's a member of the Tea Party. He's a Republican. He's a Christian. He represented District 16 in the Dallas Senate from 2015 to 2019. And here he is now in charge of a sex crimes facility that's isolated in the high desert of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And make no difference, that's the purpose of this ranch, is for sex scandals, possibly human sacrifice, maybe cremation or sulfuric acid destruction of the dead bodies. But it's for criminal activities, which are exempt under maritime law. So I don't see any arrest warrants going to be issued for Donald Huffines, despite the fact that he is actually the person responsible for any sexual or human crimes that occur on his 7,600 acres or 8,800 acres, depending on which source you believe in terms of acreage. Anyway, Huffines is associated with the Dallas Morning News. Remember, George Dealey was the owner of the Dallas Morning News, and they killed John Kennedy in Dealey Plaza, right by the obelisk, right near the obelisk, in a 999 address. Anyway, I just want to tell you there's not a millimeter's worth of difference between Donald Huffines and Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, they're the same person, okay? There's really not a difference. The only real difference is that Donald Huffines graduated from the University of Texas in Austin, right? Okay, let's move on from him. He's a tiresome person. I will show you a photograph of him. He believes in Christian values, but apparently he believes in, statutory rape also. I mean, why else would you buy a ranch that's associated with statutory rape? Anyway, he renamed Zorro Ranch Rancho de San Rafael, which is now privately owned. It was privately owned before. It was privately owned when the Spanish owned it. It's never been publicly owned. Public is never invited into this property. All right. Unless you're going to go to a sex party, there's no reason to be on this property. They're not really raising cattle out there. Okay. They probably do have some cows just as cover. All right. So the ranch is surrounded by other ranches, such as the Cerro Pilon Ranch, and which is owned by fashion designer Tommy Ford since 2001. Tommy Ford doesn't own that ranch either. Those are ranches belonging to Switzerland with fake owners. All right, and the people who were the owners of the Zorro Ranch before Jeffrey Epstein transferred it to his name, and his corporation, Cypress Corporation, was Bruce King, who was a former Attorney General of New Mexico. Um, he was the son of Bruce King, who was the Attorney General of New Mexico. So you see, Bruce King and the government of New Mexico have been for many decades related to the Zorro Ranch. Members of the King family also do appear in the Jeffrey Epstein's Little Black Book. That shouldn't be a surprise to you. Just once once the ranch transferred from Bruce King's family to Jeffrey Epstein, who does not have a family, does not have a wife, and allegedly that happened in 1993. What I'm saying is that the King family maintained all their visitation privileges post sale. And there's a very high probability that Steve Bannon visited the ranch, since Steve Bannon was quite fascinated by the idea of a ranch in New Mexico and had a long conversation with Jeffrey Epstein about Los Alamos National Lab, which is in close proximity, and that scientists from the lab also had spin-off firms that were doing, research at the Santa Fe Institute in 30 miles north of the ranch. And undoubtedly, many of the scientists would have been guests at the ranch too. And in order for Steve Bannon to maintain his radio show, just like Rush Limbaugh did, and probably Howard Stern, and probably Michael Weiner. We have Michael Weiner out here in San Rafael in Marin County. Michael Weiner goes by pseudonym Michael Savage. He's a conservative talk show host, very similar to Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is on the East Coast, and out here on the West Coast, we have a Jewish conservative talk show host who's venomous and very odious creature. And his name is Michael Weiner, but he doesn't want you to know he's Jewish, so he changed the name to Savage, which is more aggressive. Michael Savage. Anyway, in order for Michael Savage or Steve Bannon or William F. Buckley or Rush Limbaugh to maintain a license to speak on the open airways, like Tucker Carlson's father did, Dick Carlson, they all have to be involved with a sex scandal. So there has to be someone, it doesn't have to be Jeffrey Epstein, but someone needs to get audio and video of Rush Limbaugh, of Steve Bannon, of Michael Weiner Savage, right? And of Donald Trump, Donald J. Trump, and Robert Kennedy Jr. That shouldn't be a hard thing to do at all. I mean, every day he's involved in scandalous behavior. You just follow him around. You don't have to go to the Zorro Ranch to do it, or Little St. James Island, which I'll show you a photograph of that. Little St. James Island is about a mile off of one of the main islands in the United States Virgin Islands, which is a territory of the maritime law United States, meaning it belongs to Switzerland. All right, and there's only two ways to get to Little St. James Island. One is by boat, and the other is by helicopter. Those are the only two ways. Airplane won't work, and you can't drive a car. You'll sink. And then with respect to the Zorro Ranch, you could access it by airplane, by helicopter, and by car. You can drive to it. It's very easy to find, exactly 30 miles in a straight line south of Santa Fe, New Mexico. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about this person, Jeffrey Epstein, who I generally try to avoid people like Jeffrey Epstein because I see him as a gaslighting, pacification, and control, tremendous distraction. Just like I see Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Gavin Newsom. I see them as clowns in the circus. I see them as just a colossal waste of my time and your time too. You shouldn't spend any time talking about anyone who's stupid enough to run for governor of Colorado or run for the governorship of California or New Mexico or Arizona or any fake state in the nation. If you believe in voting and getting a new governor, then again, get off my channel and take some more LSD with your vodka. Jeffrey Edward Epstein, born January 20th, 1953, has no college degrees. He did go to NYU. He didn't graduate, and he went to a private college in Manhattan as well called Cooper Union. He has no degrees whatsoever from either school. He was allegedly 66 years old when he disappeared. Let's call it he disappeared. He's either dead or he's alive, but he was definitely not suicided. Okay. Suicide was not part of his MO. In 2005, police raided his Palm Beach, Florida home after years of complaints from parents of young children ages 14 to 17 years old. 36 girls came forward with their mothers to report sex crimes happening at the Palm Beach, Florida mansion, which, by the way, is very close to where George DeMornshield was murdered by a shotgun blast through his mouth, right? Along Highway 1A1, Highway 1A1, called the Jimmy Buffett Highway. Well, that's pretty close to where Jeffrey Epstein lives. By the way, it's pretty close to where Donald Trump lives, Mar-a-Lago. It's not far from the Kennedy compound. It's about 9 miles south of the Kennedy compound. Anyway, 36 young women, ages 14 to 17, had accounts that Jeffrey Epstein solicited them to do nude photography, strip, and massage him. And like I said, be photographed. And that he would pay them cash money and get them work. Anyway, nothing was done, right? Because law enforcement is part. You know that the sheriff's department is part of the sex crime and part of the chemtrail dumpings over your head. Our attorney general of the state and our district attorney of the county where the sex crimes and pollution in the sky are occurring, they stand down, they follow their orders, which are the same exact orders that Jeffrey Epstein has. Okay. Eventually, Jeffrey Epstein did plead guilty to very few of the charges. He pled guilty to procuring a minor for prostitution and soliciting another minor. And he had to register as a sex offender. He had to serve 13 months in jail, however, was given work release, meaning that he never had to be in the jail more than 7 hours a day. He only slept in the jail. But as soon as his alarm went off at 7 in the morning, he left the jail. Every day he could leave the jail. So it's one hell of a work release program where he spent far more time out of the jail in his office, continuing with his solicitation and recruitment of girls, not to mention booking appointments with Bill Clinton and people like Steve Bannon and people like Alan Dershowitz and Noam Chomsky and Woody Allen, to name a very few. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio, Ellen DeGeneres, Oprah Winfrey. Virtually every politician in Washington apparently had to go get a massage at one of the various homes, because you didn't have to go to Little St. James Island to be videotaped having sex with a 14 to 17-year-old girl. Apparently they could do that in Washington, D.C. or Georgetown, and they could do it in Manhattan, New York, and they could do it in Little St. James Island in the Virgin Islands. They could do it at the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. But they must be able to do it in hundreds of places. Like, you think they can't do it in Aspen, Colorado, or Brother Nathaniel's adopted home of Frisco, or Vail, Colorado? Of course they could. If they can do it at P. Diddy's house, and they can do it at Hugh Hefner's house, they could do it at Elvis's house, and they could do it at Rob Reiner's house, right? Anyway, having flopped out of NYU, Jeffrey Epstein in 1974, at age 21, began working as a calculus and algebra teacher at the Dalton School, which is an extremely expensive academy for collegiate advancement in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where Dorothy Kilgallen lived, where Donald Trump's first wife was murdered on the spiral staircase. Ivanka Trump, wasn't she murdered in Upper East Side directly across the street from the Indian Embassy? Yeah, she lived across the street from the Indian Embassy. And Dorothy Kilgallen lived behind the Italian Embassy, Upper East Side of Manhattan. And that's where the Dalton School is. And that's where Jeffrey Epstein, at 21 years old with no college degrees, was hired to teach calculus and algebra, despite the fact he has no credentials in those areas. And he was hired by none other than Donald Barr, who was the headmaster of the school that year. And he was hired by him. And Donald Barr, of course, is the father of Richard Barr. And Donald Barr was a member of the OSS, aka CIA, and was an administrator at Columbia University before taking the job as headmaster of the Dalton School, which is basically a CIA indoctrination school where they hire people with no degrees to indoctrinate the children into algebra and calculus, I guess, apparently. After working as a math teacher, he then is introduced. He's introduced to Alan Greenspan, who's a Jewish man who was the Fed chairman for a while, married to Andrea Mitchell of the media, of television media. And Alan Greenspan, who was a senior executive for Bear Stearns, recommended Jeffrey Epstein to be hired. And so Jeffrey Epstein went from a college dropout to an algebra teacher to an employee at Bear Stearns. And within 2 years, he became a junior partner there, which is very difficult to believe. It turned out that it was wonderful that Bear Stearns offered Jeffrey a job, because he was to be dismissed from the Dalton School because he doesn't know how to teach mathematics. They called it poor performance. Anyway, be that as it may, he continued to land on his feet and be promoted up the chain of command at Bear Stearns. He became an options trader, which is hilarious because he doesn't know anything about that. He advised clients on tax mitigation strategy. That's hilarious because Jeffrey Epstein is not a CPA. He's not a tax attorney. He has no experience with preparing a tax return, let alone advising people how to compute the lowest possible tax. This is just comedy to me, having spent 40 years, as a tax accountant. I find it repugnant that a college dropout teaching algebra would be advising wealthy people on income taxes. I find the whole thing unbelievable. And I don't believe it. I don't believe it's possible. I think that's the cover story. He was hired by a CIA operative, Richard Barr's father, to pretend to be a teacher, because that's all he can do. Jeffrey Epstein can do nothing more than to act. He has to pretend. He became a limited partner at Bear Stearns when he was 27 years old, and he was paid $200,000 a year in 1980, and then that was raised to $800,000 per year. In today's money, it would be getting paid, close to $1 million. But that was his salary in 1980, was $200,000. But he also got expense account privileges too. Jeffrey Epstein was regularly flying to Palm Beach to visit young women. He's working with Cosmopolitan magazine and Vogue. Those are CIA operations too. I don't want to get into the whole story about the guy. He's fake. He's a clone. He's a fake dude. People like Eric Weinstein, he's fake too. Eric Weinstein is as fake as Jeffrey Epstein. It's just the difference is that Eric Weinstein went to Harvard University. He got a master's degree and a PhD. But besides that, they're both frauds. Eric Weinstein is a fraud. His brother Brett is a fraud. His brother Brett went to UC Santa Cruz with a PhD, and he's the one that masqueraded as being a COVID vaccine expert, which he's not. And there's nothing vaccine about the vaccine. It's a bioweapon of aluminum and polymers and arsenic poison. What's not to understand? You're injecting materials that belong in a cellular telephone or a laptop or a tablet, computer, semiconductor chip, and you're putting it into the human body. What does that have to do with medicine or vaccination or inoculation? And the answer is it has nothing to do with that. All they're trying to do, people, is turn you into a walking hard drive, an antenna. They're taking the materials that they use with radio frequency functionality of a cell phone, mobile phone, and a computer, and they're putting it in your human body to make you a wireless device. You're a wireless hard drive. You're a wireless antenna. That's the point. Jeffrey Epstein is pretty far down the food chain in terms of importance. All he does is get sex tapes on people like Prince Andrew and people like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, under the guise of telling them, hey, if you want to get a promotion, if you want to move up and get a bigger home and get a better car and a better wife, because you'll notice most of these people get married a lot. If you want to move up the chain of command, you've got to do a sex tape. And I'm all set up. I can do it in Manhattan. I can do it in Palm Beach, Florida. I can do it on Little St. James Island. I can do it if you're ugly and stupid, like Alan Dershowitz is ugly and stupid. Noam Chomsky is ugly and stupid. And, you know, he's got a sex tape on him for sure. Because, Aaron, if you're still employed, you have a sex tape. You can't work for the Department of Energy or Harvard or Stanford. That would mean Victor Davis Hanson undoubtedly has a sex tape because he's getting paid by multiple think tanks. The Claremont Institute pays him, and the Hoover Institute, where he's a fellow, provides him housing and pays him a salary. So I'm going to say there must be a sex tape out there for Victor Davis Hanson, or at least there was. So what can I tell you? Why don't we look at some photographs, shall we? Because this will help illuminate the situation where I can explain a picture tells 1,000 words. So this is the main gate. Nothing too terribly interesting about it, but let's just nose around here. Who goes to places like Zorro Ranch? Well, the answer is, let me get myself out of the picture. All of them. They all do. They all go to the Zorro Ranch, right? They all do it. That all meaning, you know, people like Steve Bannon, Alan Dershowitz, Noam Chomsky, I would say Bradley Cooper, probably Ellen DeGeneres, and people like Woody Allen, and probably Larry David, and who knows who else, but pretty much all of them. So that means Oprah. That means, you know, anyone who has their television show or radio show. So Michael Wiener Savage, he's probably been to the Zorro Ranch or Little St. James. Leonardo DiCaprio, he probably would go. Brad Pitt, probably. Tom Hanks, who's been disappeared ever since the coronavirus came out. So anyway, who goes? And the answer is all of them do. This is formerly known as the Ghislaine. This was Bob Maxwell's yacht. Bob Maxwell is the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, and he was murdered on this yacht, and then he was thrown overboard. Okay, but he was murdered, probably garroted on this boat. All right. This is Les Wexler's boat. He owns Victoria's Secret, and he turned power of attorney over on some of his assets to Jeffrey Epstein, which of course would never happen in real life, but could happen in the metaverse, right? And this is a picture of, this is a booking photo of Jeffrey Epstein. But like I said, they can't really keep him behind bars for very long. This is the woman who was assigned to him, Ghislaine Maxwell. This is a booking photo of Ghislaine, right? This is Happier Times with Monica Lewinsky's boyfriend, married Bill Clinton, president of the fake United States, shaking hands with a college dropout, Jeffrey Epstein. These are two people that would go to all of the above places. Little St. James, and you got to believe that Bill Clinton would visit Zorro Ranch, don't you? I think Steve Bannon would visit a couple of the properties. It's hard to me to believe that he wouldn't. This is Little St. James. You'll see they have a pyramid there. And I tried to count the stripes. I'm not clear on how many stripes have. They probably have human sacrifices in here, sex orgies in here. There are multiple different cottages over the island where 14 to 17-year-old preteens can, or teenage girls can have sex with yucky men like Alan Dershowitz or Noam Chomsky, for example, or people like maybe Steve Bannon, right? Maybe Steve Bannon is having yucky sex with teenage girls, right? It's entirely plausible since he has a radio show. This is the current owner of the Zorro Ranch, which he renamed, like that's going to make a difference, the Rancho de San Rafael, right? It's kind of like Rancho del Cielo was the Ronald Reagan Ranch. And you know what? I have a feeling that whatever goes on in the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico goes on in the Ronald Reagan Ranch too. I don't see a millimeter's worth of difference between Rancho del Cielo in Santa Barbara County and Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, aka Rancho de San Rafael. All right. So anyway, they're all in on it. They're all doing it. The current owner, I think I told you what his name was, Don Huffines, the Christian hypocrite, state senator of the Lone Star State. Great that it ain't. Don Huffines. So if they were doing sex crimes on that ranch before Don Huffines, they're doing them now. I don't think anything's changed at the Zorro Ranch. All right, I'm going to post some links so you can do your research on the Zorro Ranch, and that you can do a little research on Don Huffines and Ghislaine Maxwell, who is getting only found guilty of one sex crime with one woman, one girl. So she's getting off early. She's going to get out of her whatever her detention program is. I have a feeling she's on house arrest, living in a mansion somewhere with housekeeping and Japanese gardener service would be my expectation. You can also do your research on Bruce King, who was an earlier caretaker and owner of the Zorro Ranch, along with his large family. So just to sum up here, let me just sum up as follows. There's nothing unique about Jeffrey Epstein. There's nothing to get too excited about with Jeffrey Epstein, because what you're talking about here, folks, is this is standard operation. This has been going on for hundreds of years. There are thousands of Jeffrey Epsteins. There are people doing his job before Jeffrey Epstein, during Jeffrey Epstein, and after Jeffrey Epstein. There's got to be a crew of 1,000 men who work alongside Jeffrey Epstein. The people that work on the private jets, the people that fuel the jets, the people who do the housekeeping, the people that do the groundskeeping, the people that service the swimming pools, clean up the blood if they have blood drinking contests or Pizzagate scenarios with grape juice, and they have cremation ceremonies, like they may do that at the Bohemian Grove, they may do that at the Ronald Reagan Ranch, they may do that on the Hearst Land Trust. I can think of so many places I've ridden my bicycle where I've stumbled across places like George Lucas, the Star Wars, it's called the Skywalker Ranch for George Lucas, 4,700 acres in Marin County. You could have sex parties there, no problemo. Right here near me, really close to me. And in Petaluma, on the border of Sonoma County and Marin County, is Marshall Road that takes you from the town of Marshall out eventually to the town of Novato. All along there are large ranches, not as big as this one, but they're 1,000 acres, 1,500 acres. They were owned and controlled by RCA, Radio Corporation America. We know RCA is in the porn business with Jose Menendez. So RCA is in the porn business, and they controlled a 1,500 acre ranch in Marin County. And so why couldn't they have sex parties, right? Why can't RCA? They're in the sex business, so it shouldn't be a problem. All right. So I'm telling you that there's actually nothing terribly unique about Zorro Ranch or Little St. James Island. They're a dime a dozen. We had North Fox Island in Lake Michigan, north of Chicago, and they had sex parties there with both boys and girls. Then I did a bike ride in Flathead Lake, Montana, south of Kalispell, 75-mile round. I've ridden around the lake twice, so that's 150 miles, but I did it one time for 75 miles, and then the next year I came back, did another 75 miles. And I went past a camp where Ronald Reagan's adopted son, Michael, was raped and videotaped. He was videotaped having sex as a young teenager on this all boys summer camp on Flathead Lake. And I drove right past the entrance. And of course, I didn't know that that was a place for sex parties. But North Fox Island in Lake Michigan, then you got Flathead Lake, has numerous, they have a Boy Scout and a Girl Scout camp, and they have religious camps and Christian camps. And over by the Bohemian Grove, there's a half a dozen religious summer camps for kids all around the Bohemian Grove. So could you have sex parties, in and around the Bohemian Grove in the summertime? The answer is absolutely. And it would be real easy because the kids are only 5 to 10 minutes away, on the Bohemian Highway. That's what it's called. Between Occidental and the Bohemian front gate, they have a gate that's not too different than this one. Along that highway on the west side are all these Christian children's summer camps. And they're the same exact zip code as the Bohemian Grove. Got it? All right. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do like and share. I am heavily shadow banned, as you can imagine. And I look forward to catching you on another video soon. All right. Bye-bye now.